Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar from the British Psychological Society Special Group on Coaching Psychology. This webinar is about coaching psychology supervision and it will last for about an hour. During the session, you can ask questions using the question and answer panel to the right of your screen. I'm sorry, there's no chat available, but please do listen out to what the speaker says about how she'd like to get questions from you. At the end of the session, there'll be a bit more time to talk about any questions that you've raised. And as you'll probably have seen, I've started recording this session. We'll be sending a link out to you in the next week or so that you can listen to this session again. I'm sorry if you've got any technical issues, I'm not going to be able to help you with them at the moment, but please just follow the instructions on the screen and you should be able to resolve your issues. So I'm just going to now hand over to Marie Stopforth, who's the presenter for today, and she'll take you through her presentation and answer your questions as you go through. So I'm just passing over the ball, Marie.
Wonderful, thank you, Kathy. Great, I'm in, I think. So good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly. I know you have no way of responding to me through audio, but as Kathy suggested, there is a box on the right-hand side for you to interact a little bit, ask any questions as we go through. So just a little bit about me to begin with. So I'm a coaching psychologist. I'm a trainer of coaches, and I also undertake coaching supervision, so I do supervision. I'm part of the special group in coaching psychology committee, and my role within that group at the moment is to lead on professional standards and development. So we're really focusing on training routes in coaching psychology, in learning and development, and also in registration and supervision of coaching psychologists. So it's a big piece of work of which supervision is a part of. But if you have any questions about that, there is an email that I'm going to pass on so that you can interact and come back to me with any questions about that bigger piece of work if you wanted to at a later time. So I've spent around 17 years working in higher education. I was a programme leader at the University of East London, leading their MSc programme on applied positive psychology and coaching psychology. I also founded a modest business back in 2013. I'm now just embarking on doing that full time. So I provide coaching to individuals, I work with organisations, I'm a workshop facilitator, I offer training and supervision to coaches as well. Started off as a sport and exercise psychologist, actually, so I'm a chartered psychologist, registered sport and exercise psychologist with the Healthcare Professions Council. I have a PhD in sports psychology from the University of Chichester. And I'm really part of the committee and doing this webinar because I feel passionately about advancing and promoting coaching psychology as a profession. So I'm hoping that you will be on this call, on this webinar, because you are either a coach that's considering supervision or you're a coach that's already in supervision. You're just wondering about what that should look like and feel like and how you could get the best out of your supervision experience. But also, if you are a coach supervisor already or you potentially are interested in training as a coach supervisor, I'm really hoping that you will get some benefit from that, from it as well. So Magda, I can see your question. It's just audio connection today. I hope that's okay. In terms of what we're going to cover, just so that you're not waiting for something that doesn't appear, we are going to talk about coaching supervision, and what that is, define it, look at the purposes of that and the benefits of it. And then we're going to look at what you should sort of expect from that around, the relationship, the supervision relationship, models that supervisors might like to use while supervising, and any competencies that we would expect coaching supervisors to have. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to get the best from supervision. So whether you are a coach who's looking at supervision or whether you are a supervisor, how do we make sure that people are getting the most from their supervision? And then right at the end, I'm going to give you a little bit of an update from the special group in coaching psychology in terms of where we are with supervision and our plans for the future around a supervision register. And I will absolutely leave some time for questions at the end. Having said that, I can see the question and answer block that you have on the right hand side of your screen. So please feel free, as questions arise, to pop them in that box. I may not be able to answer all of them as we go. I'll try my best if I can do, but obviously I need to keep one eye on time. But I will answer as many of your questions as I can at the end. Okay, so first of all, thinking about what coaching supervision is. So there are lots and lots of definitions on coaching supervision. So this one here from Clutterbuck says that it is a collaborative process facilitating coaches and coach supervisors to grow their reflective practice with a view to continuous improvement and professional development, client safety, and strengthening of professional identity. The process considers the entire system surrounding the supervisee and their work and seeks to bring value to all those stakeholders connected to that work. So the reason I particularly like this definition is that it really puts reflective practice at the heart of supervision. So it suggests that through this reflective practice that we will do with our supervisors, we can improve our knowledge, our expertise and our capabilities as coaches, and really just ensure that we're practicing safely, that we're within our professional boundaries, and that we're strengthening our identity as coaches and our beliefs and motivations around our profession. It also suggests that this reflection, so reflection being the learning part of the learning process, that this can be facilitated by a supervisor with the aim of benefiting the coach, but not only the coach, their clients and the wider systems that the coach operates within as well. So it's a nice, I think it's a nice rounded definition. So what is the purpose of supervision then? What is it all about? What should we be sort of aiming to get from it? So there are three main elements that are suggested to be the purpose of supervision. So you've got Proctor on the left there, which is taken from counselling supervision, which talks about the three main purposes or elements being formative, normative and restorative. So the formative element is around the development of skills, so maybe talking about the skills that you're using and how they can be developed and how you can learn new skills. Education of the supervisee as well, or the coach. I will use supervisee and coach probably interchangeably, so hopefully that will be fine. So it is about development of skills and education of the supervisee or coach. Then there's the normative function, which is about ongoing monitoring and evaluation of our everyday work. So what is it that we're doing, making sure there's quality control around that, making sure that boundaries are being maintained, professional boundaries are being maintained, and that ethical standards are high. So it's a way of touching base with somebody around our ethical practice as well as our professional boundaries. And then the restorative element from Proctor talks about ensuring that we're adequately refreshed as coaches, that we discuss any emotional baggage. So it's that understanding of the fact that coaching can be quite an emotional process for the coach. So it's about understanding any anxieties, any issues that have come up, any emotional baggage, anything that's coming up for you as a coach that may be impacting on your well-being. So there's this restorative element to it as well. So more recently, these three elements have sort of been redefined by Hawkins et al. So they're along similar lines, but Hawkins talks about the three elements as being qualitative, developmental and resourcing. So the qualitative element is around the quality, the work standards, the ethical integrity that we talked about earlier. The developmental is around the development of skills and understanding capabilities. And the resourcing again is around just making sure that you have the support to talk about what's going on with you around your coaching practice. So just making sure that you're fully supported in that. So these two sort of models, if you like, of the purpose of supervision are quite similar in their approaches. Peter Hawkins talks a lot as well about the fact that we should be systemic in our approaches as well. So that means that we're not just focusing on the coach or even on their clients, but on the client's organisation as well, and the organisation's stakeholders and connections between these levels. So supervision isn't just about what's going on for the coach. There's lots, it should be at a systemic level, so that we're taking into account the context in which they're working as well. And in fact, there was some recent research by Turner and Clutterbuck that said, so they were looking at business and executive coaches, and they believe that half of the issues that were brought to supervisors were in some way related to contracting between clients and their organisations. So including this wider context is really important, and addressing that and discussing it within supervision is really important as well. So why should we be engaging with supervision then? Why do we think it's important to engage with supervision? Well, firstly, virtually all of the coaching bodies encourage supervision in some way or another for those that are seeking accreditation. But clearly it's more than that, it's more important than that. So we really should be continually trying to improve and develop our personal and professional practice, and to keep up to date with what's going on in the profession, advancing our knowledge and skills, and of course engaging with some sort of formal training, some sort of formal CPD, continuing professional development, so going on courses, attending webinars. All of that is really important and one way of improving and developing our personal and professional practice. But supervision adds an extra element. So supervision is arguably the thing that's able to help us to connect our formal learning and training that we might do in the classroom or online to our practice. So it gives us the opportunity to reflect on how we're actually applying our knowledge and skills that we've learned within the classroom within our coaching conversations. So it really connects us to what we've learned. It gets that applied, it allows us that chance to reflect on our applied practice and see how we're doing with that. So it gives us space to really enhance our insight into how we're practicing our coaching. It deepens our understanding of what we're doing and how effective we're being. And therefore it has the opportunity or the potential to enhance our professional practice, and obviously the outcomes for our clients and all of the other stakeholders that we've talked about as well. And it's able to do that in a way that maybe formal training is unable to do, because we're able to reflect on the practice of coaching. But it's also a place where we can be quite vulnerable and be able to really voice and explore our concerns or worries about our own practice in a supportive and non-judgmental environment. And that's really critically important. And when we come on to talking about, you know, what a supervision relationship should be like, and how you might want to choose a supervisor and whether a particular supervisor is right for you, then I think we should always come back to this point. Are you able, with your supervisor, to feel like you can be vulnerable and really voice your concerns and talk about what's going on for you, all your anxieties and hang-ups about your coaching practice? Are you able to really openly do that in a non-judgmental environment with your supervisor? And if the answer to that is yes, then you're in the right place. But that's critically important. It's also an opportunity to just check in on how we're doing. So it links to that qualitative element around work standards and ethics. I know it says here quality guarantee for clients. I'm not sure that I really like those words. I don't know that it is a quality guarantee. It's the word guarantee, I think, that I take issue with. But it is certainly a way of ensuring that you're being as effective as you possibly can be, and that your work standards and your ethics are on point. And importantly, as we've already mentioned, it is a form of self-protection. So it's about looking after your own well-being. So that links back to that resourcing element that we talked about earlier. So there are some really important reasons for engaging with supervision, and certainly the requirement from the professional bodies, I would argue, shouldn't be a main driver for seeking out supervision. There's lots of other benefits that we need to think about. So the Association for Coaching in 2018 came up with this list of benefits that you can see here. So they talked about supervision, ensuring best interests of the client are being upheld, supporting the coach to work best practice and ethics, to monitor client work, develop skills in a supportive environment, to utilise feedback and enhance practice, to identify areas of further development. So that's really important. That's the ability to actually identify through this reflective discussion process, to identify what areas maybe you feel that you need further education or training or skill development on, and talk those through with the supervisor. Manage and respond to the effect of client work on the coach. So this is this restorative function that we've talked about. And to explore new perspectives and identify new approaches and ways of working. So it's about moving forwards and not just practicing in the way that we've always practiced, but being able to identify and get insight into the way that we're working and find new ways of working, new approaches. And I'll touch on this again later, because it raises a question about who you choose to be your supervisor. So whether you want somebody that sort of lives in the same world as you and has a similar sort of approach or theoretical background, or actually whether you want somebody that's quite different, so that you can gain new ways of working. So that's what the Association for Coaching says. But it wasn't until fairly recently that research was carried out that actually asked coaches themselves what they felt the benefits were. So coaches that are undertaking supervision, and ask them what do you think the benefits are from supervision. So there are two interesting studies, and again I can share these resources with you if people feel it would be helpful. So Louise Shepherd in 2017 and Alison Hodge in 2016. So these are qualitative studies that talk to supervisees and supervisors about the benefits of supervision, amongst some other things. So firstly, supervisees, coaches reported that they really liked having somewhere to go when they felt a bit stuck or they came up against a particular challenge. So it was really useful to just have somewhere to take that challenge and have somebody that they could bounce that off of and have a discussion with about it. They also report feeling lighter. So they describe feeling a bit lighter after supervision, having clarity and feeling at peace following supervision. And I certainly feel that this is something that resonates with me. So I remember when I first started having supervision, I was supervising somebody around their career prospects, and I was feeling a little bit stuck with them, and we certainly weren't progressing perhaps as I would have liked us to have been. And so it was very early on in my coaching career. I'm making excuses, and I found I wasn't seeking it out. I just happened to stumble across a job advert that I thought they would find that would be perfect for them, and I sent it to them. And then after I sent it to them, I beat myself up about it for ages, thinking, oh my goodness me, I've so overstepped the mark of what I should and shouldn't be doing as a coach. And I felt terrible about it, and it played on my mind for ages. And I remember taking it to supervision and talking to my supervisor and saying, this is what I've done and it's awful. And her response was very non-judgmental, and her simple question was, have you asked the coachee how they feel about the fact that you sent this to them, whether they felt pressured or all the things that was going on in my head. And it was that sort of really non-judgmental and simple suggestion that just made me feel so much lighter. I'd been worried about it so much, and it enabled me to go into that next conversation, just have that coaching session, have that conversation. So it really did allow me to feel a little bit lighter and at peace. And actually the outcome was she was surprised that I was even worried about it. She was like, no, it was really interesting actually. So it can really have that benefit of taking that pressure off that maybe we put on ourselves sometimes. Coaches also reported feeling really valued, feeling that they valued having somebody that could empathise with them and really understood the challenges of what they are experiencing within their own coaching practice. And actually they found it really useful. They said they found it really useful when their supervisors shared some of their own experiences with them. So a little bit of disclosure was beneficial to the coaches. So it was useful that their supervisor, I guess, also showed a little bit of vulnerability and openness about what goes on with them. They reported that supervision helped them to get new perspectives on their coachees after discussing what was going on with their supervisor. And some interestingly reported learning from their supervisor by observing the supervisor's the interaction between themselves and their supervisor and the skills that the supervisor used. So, for example, seeing the supervisor comfortable enough to sort of really identify what's going on in the moment right now for us, or challenging assumptions in a certain way. So this idea of modelling was another benefit that people said that they got from supervision. So Alison Hodges' work identified that coaches can feel quite isolated in their work, especially when there are sort of complex or messy issues that arise. And it was just simply the process of talking things through with the supervisor that gave them a sense of clarity and a way forwards. So it's this concept, isn't it, that as soon as we have to, we can have things going on in our head, it's a bit messy, and as soon as we have to talk to another person about that, we have to process it in a different way so that it comes out of our mouths in a way that makes sense to another person. So certainly this work highlighted that and suggested that people found that dialogue really useful. And additionally, coaches identified that being able to offload concerns, get reassurance and feedback and encouragement for their supervisors really helped them to attend to their own well-being as well as their own effectiveness as a coach. So real key benefits. So given the evidence that I've already presented, I think we can argue that supervision gives us an opportunity to learn and develop as coaches in a way that's really quite different from maybe other forms of CPD that we might undertake. But as we know, as coaches, it's often the relationship that really makes the difference. So it's certainly in coaching. So what do we know about what makes a good supervisory relationship? Well, one of the key aspects, perhaps not surprising, is mutual trust, safety and respect. So in order to feel safe and supported in a supervisory relationship, these aspects are critical. So again, I'd encourage you, if you are in supervision at the moment or thinking about engaging with supervision, really thinking about that. So, and I'll talk again later about the power relationship perhaps, and whether that might interfere sometimes with this feeling of mutual trust, safety and respect. The answer might be no, but when you're considering supervision, being sure that these elements are present, I think is really important. You should, of course, also expect a supervisor to have some experience and training in things to do with supervision, such as self-awareness, ethical practice, and some of the processes that underpin supervision. I would say, though, on that, be aware that supervisor training and accreditation is sort of relatively new, and whilst we should perhaps arguably aspire for all supervisors to go through specific coach supervision training and be accredited, there are surely a number of supervisors out there who have lots of experience of supervision or who have trained as a supervisor in other disciplines but not coaching. So I would say don't automatically discount somebody on those grounds. It's worth having a conversation. We'll talk a little bit later about what that conversation might look like, but it's worth having a conversation about their motivations, their approaches, their experience, their training, just so that we can be sure that they are the right supervisor for us. Sorry, I'm just seeing that a question popped up and I'm just trying to access it. Okay, so question from Emma. So Emma, I see you're saying you'd be interested in view on supervision in a group setting. So your group has been meeting for 10 years. We work on many minds coming together. Yes. So if you just hold that thought, because I will be coming on and touching on group supervision in just a few slides, if that's okay. Okay. Also, just be aware that supervisors arguably shouldn't be trying to create clones of themselves. So the profession is evolving all of the time. So supervision should be as much about being future fit, about all of us being future fit as anything else. So it's important not to fall into that trap of thinking that, again, it may be a power thing, of thinking because your supervisor has talked to you about a certain way of doing things that that is the right way to do it and that's the way you must do it. Not the case. So, you know, that should be an open discussion about the best way forward, and it's about, as I say, being future fit and not just clones of your supervisor. And very importantly, the work should be collaborative. So you should jointly decide together, supervisor, supervisee, you should jointly decide what the agenda is, and this agenda should be really informed by the challenges and the learning opportunities that the coaching work is presenting for the coach. So it really needs to be a collaborative event. So supervisors will often have a preferred model of supervision that they work with. There's no right or wrong approach, the same as coaching models. So there's no right or wrong approach, but it does help having some sort of model that people work to, some approach that they use. It does help to guide the work that you do together. So it's worth just talking to your supervisor about what their approach is and what sort of models they might touch on or use. So I've chosen a few here for us to just briefly get an overview on. I'm not going to go into these in masses of detail in the interest of time, but if you are interested in learning any more about any of these, I can direct you to some good reading. But I just wanted you to be able to get a taste of what some of these models might look like. So firstly, the seven-eyed model of supervision is pretty widely used across the world. And it just suggests that there are 7 lenses that can be used when we explore coaching work. So I'll quickly run through those lenses. So the first one is a focus on the coachee. So you might have conversations about what's going on for the coachee. So the purpose isn't necessarily to focus on the coachee's problem, if you want to call it that, but it's just about trying to keep the client or the coachee present in the supervision. So thinking about how the coachee was reacting in that situation, for instance, would be useful to explore. So the first lens is the focus on the coachee. The second lens is the focus on the coach. So what's going on for the coach themselves in terms of the skills or the interventions that they're using, what they're doing and why they're doing it. The third one is the focus on the coach-coachee relationship. So if you were a fly on the wall in that room during that coaching conversation, what would you notice? How would you see that you were interacting? What would the contracting look like? What are the expectations and the needs in the room? Are there any tensions there? So that sort of fly on the wall focus on that relationship. Then there's the focus on how the coach is affected by what's going on for them. Sorry, yeah, I'm just looking at a question. Yes, I will send a reading list, absolutely. So there are some references at the end, but there are some key readings that you might find useful. So when I finish up, I'm going to send some stuff to Kathy, who's hosting for us, and make sure they get sent out with anything else that's coming your way. Yeah, so the focus on how the coach was affected, what was going on for them. And then another focus that people might want to use is around the supervisor-coach relationship. And it's something that's sometimes not discussed a great deal in supervision. So what's going on in your relationship with your supervisor or with your supervisee? And what conversations do you need to have around that? And is it mirroring some of what's going on for the coach in their relationship with their coachee? The sixth lens of the 7 is focused on the supervisor, so the supervisor feeling that they can share what their feelings and reactions are, and talk to their supervisee about what's going on for them. And then, of course, there's this wider context, so what's going on within the organisation, within the culture that might be impacting on the coachee. So if this is new to you, if this model is new to you, I know it sounds a little bit complex, there's lots of bits to it, 7 in fact, but the real skill, the real beauty of something like this is it gives you different things to focus on, different lenses, as Hawkins and Smith call it, through which you can explore what's going on in coaching for the coach, for the coachee, for the supervisor, for the wider context or the organisation. And the skill is to be able, as a supervisor, the skill is to be able to move through these lenses and know which is the right one to use at the right time. So that's an important element of it. CLEAR is a process model, so a little bit like some other process models in coaching that you might have come across. So CLEAR is an acronym. It stands for contract, listen, explore, action, and review. So it's just a way of guiding a conversation. So that contracting, the agenda setting at the beginning, the listening and the exploring, the gaining new insight and awareness, and then the decision around action that will be taken as a result of that learning, and reviewing that and seeing that that's followed through in a beneficial way. The full spectrum coaching supervision model really just puts the relationship between the supervisor and the supervisee at the heart of everything. So it focuses on the energy around that relationship, parallel processes and conditions that are necessary for adult learning. 3 worlds, 4 territories. So similar to the lenses, I guess, in some ways. So this model talks about the fact that there are 3 worlds, if you like. So the world of work, the coaching world, and the supervision world. And then there are 4 territories. So insight, readiness, vision, and action. So insight is around what I sense is happening. Readiness is how am I ready to respond to that? Vision is, do I know what I want to get out of this? And the skill for action is around transforming that vision into some action. So these 3 worlds and these 4 territories can interact. So for instance, within the coaching world, if you like, you can talk about what it is that you want to get out of that and how you can transform that into some sort of action. In the supervision world, you might want to understand more about what's going on for you and whether you're ready to respond, whether you're well equipped to respond to that. So it's this interaction between these 3 worlds and these 4 territories. Then there's the 7 conversations in supervision. So again, similar to the lenses, I guess, but just different conversations that you can have. So the 7 conversations are the coach's thinking before a conversation, so what's going on for the coach before they go into their coaching assignment. A conversation about the coachee's thinking, reflective thinking or preparatory thinking, so what potentially is going on for them before they come in to coaching. Then there's what's said during the actual coaching conversation and reflection on that. And then there's what's not said, both on from the coach's perspective and from the coachee's perspective, so you might want to explore some of that. And then there's the reflections after coaching of both the coach and the coachee. So again, it's just a way of, I was going to use the word reframing, I'm not sure that's the right word, but just a way of looking at things from lots of different perspectives to make sure that you're getting the best conversations out of coaching. And then the final one I have here, and there are others, these are just some that I've just picked up to give us examples. So the final one is the 3 pillars model. So I just want to flick over to this slide. I understand it's a little bit busy and you might not be able to read stuff right at the bottom. So it looks quite complex, but actually the benefit of this model is that, and this is Alison Hodge who proposed this model, so what she's saying is that you can take any one of those models that we've just talked about. You can think about the purpose as being normative, formative, restorative, or any other purpose of supervision that you've discussed and agreed on. You can take the tasks or the tools or the techniques that you use within supervision, and they all go into this bowl of what she calls generative dialogue. So it's a dialogue that really, you know, helps you to move forward and get new insight and awareness and actions. But really what's important are these three things at the bottom, the three pillars that support that dialogue. No matter what you put into that bowl, these three pillars have to be there to support that dialogue. And those three pillars are the relationship, which we've already touched upon. So that important relationship between the two of you, creating the core conditions for adult learning. So how do you learn? What is the best way for you to learn? What's important? What needs to happen within that conversation for you to get the best out of that in terms of your learning and development? And then reflective practice, so making sure that reflection is at the heart of what you're doing, that reflective practice is good, and that it's really allowing you to gain new self-awareness and for learning to emerge. So I think that's quite a nice way of sort of rounding this section off in terms of bringing everything together. It's quite a holistic sort of model. Okay, so I know lots and lots of information there. As I say, I'm happy to point you in the direction of other reading if you're interested, but I think the key thing that I would like you to take away from this section of what we've just talked about is what I said at the beginning of it. You know, there's no right or wrong. It's just about what you know, knowing that your supervisor has something in their mind in terms of the approach that they're taking, and as a supervisor, making sure that you are able to you know, guide your supervisee, work with your supervisee in a sort of logical, systematic way. I would say personally, I tend to selectively pick and choose. So I might work through different lenses, and then I might think about those 7 conversations. I might focus totally on rapport building and the relationship. So I'll sort of move around those a little bit and be a bit flexible depending on the need. In terms of what people take to supervision, so you might be wondering what's normal, what should I take to supervision with me, what are the sorts of things I want to talk about. I could have created a really big long list here around, you know, your concerns about your practice, ethical issues, contracting issues, overstepping boundaries. You know, there are so many things that you could take. But really, I think these 2 quotes really sum up what this should be about, what you can take to supervision. So Day talks about that supervision is about making sense of critical moments, gain a reassurance that you've responded appropriately, and to learn from those moments. So as I said, it's sometimes that complex or messy stuff, those moments that you really reflect on and think about. So anything that comes up around that, taking that to supervision just to gain that reassurance and to learn from that is really important. Now the second one is interesting because I thought twice about putting this into this presentation, and then I had to reflect on why I felt a little uncomfortable with it. So what Dahan said is 85% of coaches have used supervision to explore the most concerning, worrying or shameful episode in the coach's practice over the last few years, and they found this helpful. And as I say, I sort of ummed and ahed about whether to include this, and I think it's the word shameful that I sort of struggle with a little bit. But I think if you take that word with all the emotion that it sort of conjures up, and you think, I could do that with my supervisor, I could, you know, the thing that I just really cringe when I think about it that I've done in my coaching practice, if you can take that to your supervisor, then you've got the right supervisor. And as a supervisor, you know, if you can really be open enough to allow people to feel that they can talk about whatever it is that's bothering them, whatever it is that they feel that they've done that's terrible, which probably isn't terrible, then that's really important. So you really should feel like you can take anything around your coaching practice to your supervisor, and to have an open and honest and helpful conversation about that. So how do we get the best out of supervision then? So I think a lot of what I've said so far, leads us logically to this. But again, Alison Hodges' work identified some really key things that are important. So it's important to be proactive and collaborative in your contracting. So it needs to be done together. And as a supervisee, a coach, you need to be proactive in terms of what it is that you want to get out of that. Avoiding deference and compliance. So again, I've talked about this already, touched on it already. We don't want clones. So we don't want people to fall into just doing what their supervisor has suggested because their supervisor is more experienced than them or more educated than them or whatever it might be. It really should be about you exploring issues together and coming up with new ways of working. Establishing trust and respect, so that's obviously been a key theme throughout everything that we've said so far. Explore and establish a clear purpose for supervision. So that might be an overall purpose, but it might be the purpose of a particular supervision session as well. So really being clear about what it is that you're hoping to get out of supervision or a particular session is really important. Be honest and open in giving and receiving feedback. So it's important that you feel able to give feedback about your supervision, but receive that feedback as well. And as a supervisor, you should be open to hearing how that is going for your supervisees. Making sure you manage for and prepare for and manage your sessions. So thinking about what it is beforehand, coming with a full plate, if you like, to supervision, so that you've got things that you know it would be useful to discuss. Bringing all of yourself and being present, so taking some time beforehand perhaps to shut away those other things that are going on in life and really making sure that you're present in that moment to get the most out of it. Work together to identify and explore learning and development needs. So really, CPD is important. We will talk about continuing professional development. But it shouldn't be just a tick box exercise. You should be able to, within a supervision session, you should be able to really identify areas that you feel that you need a little bit more knowledge about, or you need to upskill in. So identifying those and then choosing your CPD accordingly is really, really important. So we spend so much money on courses and webinars or whatever it might be. Make sure they are the things that really matter to you and that will really progress your own practice. Considering how learning will be applied, so it's not just about what you do in the session, it's about what you do outside of that session once you've had the session. Attending to your own well-being, so just making sure that you are keeping yourself topped up, that you are maybe using supervision as an opportunity to talk about the things, talk about how, things that are getting you down, and talk about the things that are good for you. What works for you in terms of your own well-being, in terms of keeping yourself topped up and ready to work with others. And keeping notes and reflections from supervision. So this is interesting actually, because as I was putting this together, it made me realise that that's something I need to talk to my supervisees about and encourage them a little bit more to keep notes and reflections from supervision, because the evidence tells us that if you do take time afterwards to sort of reflect and look over what you've done and what you've talked about and make those notes, then that can be really useful for your learning. So again, I know this is a little bit busy, but this is taken from Louise Shepherd's work. And what's interesting, I think, about this is that it talks about the sorts of things that might get in our way within supervision and the sorts of things that might enable us to get the most out of supervision. So around the outside, that light blue circle, you've got the learning that can be taking place, the fear or anxiety around supervision, going into supervision, and maybe something around this power relationship. But there are things that help or hinder us within it. So obviously there's things around anxiety, fear of judgment, shame, that word coming up again, There's certainly things around blocking. So supervisors or coaches talked about blocking, including not fully preparing, winging it, going into supervision and just sort of winging it a little bit, and that resulted on a very narrow discussion rather than opening up to multiple perspectives. They also talked about some psychological tactics such as asking lots of questions, getting very lost in the detail to try and avoid the things that they were worried about talking about. So that blocking is something that's going to stop you from getting the most out of your supervision. Lack of agency is a thing as well, so not really taking control of that relationship, not really understanding what the point of it is, being unsure about how to make the most of it. Hopefully this helps with that sort of thing. Also, not being reluctant to raise issues in supervision, issues with supervision, and not changing supervisor when needs are not being met. So in this work, they suggested that 4 out of 12 coaches, supervisees, had never discussed their relationship with their supervisor, their supervisory relationship with their supervisor, despite some of them being with the same supervisor for over 5 years. So it's really good practice to make space at the end of a supervision session to talk about that relationship and how it's going. So exploring that is a really healthy part of supervision, I think. The other blocker might be around not seeing yourself as equal. So all supervisors were seen in Shepherd's work as having, by the supervisees, as having a position of power. So everybody saw a power relationship there, and many didn't see themselves as being an equal partner. And, you know, again, I would say if you're thinking about supervision, if you're a supervisor, if you're being supervised, think about that relationship. It should feel like a peer relationship. So it shouldn't feel, I mean, it may be there, but it shouldn't impact on the conversations that you're having. And interestingly, you know, supervisors were seen as having more responsibility in the process than supervisors actually wanted. So they wanted their supervisees to lead the supervision. So the things that can enable supervision, make it a more positive experience, are a positive mindset, so being clear on how it might benefit you, bringing what's working well into that conversation as well as the other stuff, being willing to be vulnerable and open, and to translate any learning into action. Co-creation is really important, so finding a supervisor that you can really connect with, being really clear about what you want out of supervision, being attuned to the supervisor, and again, just making sure you don't collude and become too cozy in that relationship, and being really clear if your needs aren't being met. And actively participating is really important as well. So coming to supervision, as I say, with a full plate, taking responsibility for the agenda, deciding on actions, etc., and taking notes, obviously, after the session as well. Interesting as well, Shepherd talked about undertaking supervisor training. So she suggested that people who undertook supervision training actually felt like they got much more out of their own supervision. So just by understanding the process a little bit more, they got more out of that. One eye on time, we're nearly there. I just wanted to touch on, so this goes back to, who was it that asked the question? Can't remember. I want to say Deborah, around forms of supervision. So supervision has many guises. So any of these here can be face-to-face, in person. They can be over the telephone, or they can be online. So forms of supervision might include one-to-one with a coach and a supervisor, one-to-one peer coaching supervision. So it might not be a trained accredited supervisor, but just a peer that you get on with, that you can share with, that you can bounce ideas off of. Group coaching supervision. So actually having a group of you with a supervisor, so somebody that's skilled in sort of group dynamics and can handle a few people at one time in a supervisory session. And peer group supervision, which I think is what the question alluded to, around a group of people getting together and really discussing things with each other. So if you're thinking about, if you're looking at accreditation and the bodies out there, they will be probably quite clear on what sort of supervision, what form of supervision they are expecting. But if you are looking at supervision for your own, just literally for your own professional development, you've listened to what we've talked about today and you're thinking, yeah, I really need to just have that space where I can go and do all this stuff that Marie talked about, then it may be that, you know, peer supervision with one other person or peer group supervision, or and we know, by the way, that a barrier to supervision is a financial one often. So it may be that there are other forms of supervision. Group supervision can be a little bit cheaper. So there are lots of forms of supervision that you can take. What I would say is that what tends to happen is that in the early days of coaching, I don't think you can beat that one-to-one supervisor to coach supervision relationship. I really don't. However, if you've been coaching for many, many years and you've undertaken supervision one-to-one with a supervisor regularly, then these other options might start to become quite attractive, and you might get as much out of them perhaps as one-to-one. You might want to dip into the one-to-one every now and again, but it's like a continuum. So the more experienced you become, the more you're coaching. If you're supervising others yourself, maybe, then it may be that, you know, a peer group supervision might be the way for you to go. Really important that we just touch on self-supervision as well. So let's not discount that. Let's remember that actually learning to reflect on our own practice and challenge ourselves sometimes can be really beneficial as well. Again, it's a skill we can hone over time. Again, you know, maybe it's easier for more experienced coaches, but it's a good thing to remember that we should be trying to hone those skills around self-supervision as well. Just thinking about how to choose a supervisor. So really understand what your needs are and ensure that the person that you choose can meet those needs. Be clear in your own mind about whether you want somebody with similar background to you, similar theoretical underpinnings, similar approach, or a different one. So, you know, I always say I'm a psychologist first. I would say I'm a psychologist who coaches, and therefore, you know, people tend to gravitate, I think, towards me if they want to perhaps understand a little bit more about psychology and how psychology can help to underpin coaching. So that understanding about, you know, behavioural science and emotions and behaviour and cognitions. But it may be that you want somebody really quite different to you, or somebody that's sort of in the same world as you. So think about that when you're undertaking supervision. A theme through this has been around chemistry, so really making sure that you get on with that person, that you can really open up and be vulnerable and talk about those shameful experiences, if you want to call them that. That's super important. Do ask about a supervisor's approach, their experience, their accreditation, and their motivations. I think that's a really interesting question to ask a supervisor, a potential supervisor, and as a supervisor to expect to be asked. So why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to supervise people? So that can be quite an insightful question. And I think if you feel uncomfortable asking that question, then you have to question whether you'd be comfortable asking other questions or having other conversations as well. And just be aware of any power dynamic. As I said, from the research, it looks like most people feel that there's a power dynamic there. I'm not saying that we have to eliminate this. I'm just saying be aware of the impact that it might have on your relationship with your supervisor. There are some competencies that the EMCC talk about that you also might want to consider. Does your supervisor know how to manage the process of supervision? Can they facilitate your development, provide support, promote professional standards? Are they self-aware? Do they understand the complexity of this relationship? Do they have systemic awareness so they know it's about organisations as well as individuals? And if appropriate, can they handle the group dynamics of group supervision if that's where you're going? So finally, very quickly, again, one eye on the clock, I'm going to do this in a minute. I just want to talk very briefly about where we are going as a special group in coaching psychology with our support around supervision. So we have had peer practice groups running in the past, and they have somewhat fizzled out, if I'm honest, but we are relaunching these peer practice groups. So, you know, with us looking at professional development and being a career companion to coaches and coaching psychologists, this is one of the things that we feel is really, really important. So peer practice groups are local groups where you can meet other coaches, where you can, they are organised in slightly different ways, although there is sharing of best practice. But it might be that there are guest speakers, that there is some skills training available, and that there is some peer-to-peer supervision facility as well. So if you are interested in that, please make contact. I will somehow get an email address to you. So there is an SGCP training email address that I can share. Those emails come through to me, and I can direct you to the person that is coordinating peer practice groups if you feel that's something that you want to get involved in. I should say as well, by the way, that we are really looking within the special group of coaching psychology to open up more to coaches who are not chartered psychologists, who are not psychologists at all. So we really want to encourage people in to learn more about the psychology that underpins coaching. And so these things are not exclusive to chartered psychologists. If you're a coach and you're interested in learning more about psychology, then you can join the BPS as an affiliate member, and then you can join the special group of coaching psychology, and you can absolutely access us in terms of our desire to be career companions to people who are coaching and who want to use psychology as that underpinning to their coaching. We are also looking at developing coach supervision training programs. So Karen, I see you thank you, saying it's a great presentation. I see that you're interested in doing some supervision training. So that's something we're in the process of developing at the moment. It probably will be launched maybe towards the middle of the year, summer. But it's something that we haven't done before and we feel that we really need to do. And off the back of that, we will be looking at establishing a register of coaching psychology supervisors. So if you are interested in doing supervisor training with us, then keep an eye out for when that is launched. And if you're interested in getting a supervisor that's particularly trained around psychology, then our register will help you with that. Great, so I'm just seeing somebody saying, great to see the relaunch of peer practice groups, happy to support supervision training, amazing. Great question. So sorry, Nick, I'm going to come back to you. I just want to say, that's all I was going to present. There are some references here, but as I said, I will make sure that there are some resources available to you. So Nick, I can see your question is, what current training do you need to be a supervisor? Great question. That's like asking, what training do you need to be a coach? So as you know, we're unregulated at present. There are lots, I'm not going to advocate a particular training course, but there are lots of training courses out there. I would encourage you, if you're interested in being a supervisor, to just have a look at some of the coaching courses, supervisor courses that are out there. Think maybe about some of the things that we've discussed and see if those training courses meet your needs and cover some of the things that we've discussed. There are some registers already out there. So I want to say the Association of Coach Supervisors and the Association for Coaching have a coach supervisor register, as I believe EMCC does as well. So it's worth going to those organisations at the moment and just seeing what their requirements are around training to be a supervisor. But there are some courses out there, but as I say, it's something that we're going to be developing. So yeah, hopefully we'll be launching that later on in the year. Okay, so we've got a minute. I didn't leave too long, did I? Are there any other questions before we sign off for the afternoon? No? Okay, so as I said, I will share an email address with Kathy that she can share with you, and some of the reading that I think might be interesting for you, and make sure that that gets sent out to you. So thank you all so much.